If you enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And let me know what types of videos you guys would like to see. If you want to see more true scary stories or creepypasta videos, just let me know in the comments. With that said, enjoy the video. Number 1. This incident happened back in 2014 when I was last committed to a psych ward for a suicide attempt. A little background. I'm a female and I was 19 at the time. I was coming off of 3 years of bipolar medication while at a peak of substance abuse facilitated by my first year in college, going crazy with new adult freedom. One night, I had a big mental episode and was committed for the first time in the adult ward. Previously, I'd only been admitted in the minors ward during my adolescence for similar episodes. Within this unit, you share a room with the same sex but weren't given any proper introductions. The facility as a whole wasn't managed effectively, nor did any of the nurses or doctors seem to care other than to prescribe and get you out. I was led to the room I was staying in, and the nurse just said to the other lady in the room, "This is your new roommate," and left. The woman appeared to be in her late 40s, early 50s, Hispanic, and just a little taller than me. She would not keep her gaze off the floor in front of her, and didn't say a word or move when I said hi. I noticed that she had a tattoo of a cartoon version of a classic red devil, but as a baby. I figured I'd just leave her alone and stick to my area of the room. The first night went as they normally do in a psych ward, with a nightly group, and my roommate declined to share anything yet again, only staring at the floor, barely moving an inch. While everyone was lining up to be given their medication before bed, the ward across began to start banging on the glass of the door and screaming. One guy was smiling while banging his head against the glass window part, while the guys behind him were screaming and jumping around. It seemed as if they were almost going to break through, but orderlies came and took them away, with their screams still lingering through the halls. Being in psych wards before, I wasn't surprised by the out-of-the-ordinary behavior, like yelling or fight starting, but this was completely different to me. I was with disturbed adults now, people who had years of illness deteriorating their mind, not little angry kids anymore. I actually felt scared for the first time because of the high level of unpredictability with these people. I know I wasn't all there in the head, but even these people had me anxious and made it difficult to try and get any rest that night. You know that feeling of being awake but you haven't opened your eyes yet? The moment where you are barely waking up and everything is fuzzy? This is the state of conscious I was later that night. I felt like I was waking up, but as if something was waking me up, yet still tired, so I wasn't opening my eyes. The more I came to, I felt pressure on my forehead, and I could sense sweat dripping on my face. I opened my eyes to find my roommate standing over my bed, staring me in the eye, with one hand on my forehead and the other in a balled-up fist on her chest, while she speaks in what I assume is tongues. I look into her eyes, and they're blank and empty of any emotion. She keeps speaking faster and getting louder. I'm paralyzed at this moment, not sure what to do or what she would even do if I were to yell or move. There was only us in the room, and the nurse's station is all the way at the end of the hall. She started wiping the sweat off my forehead while still speaking fast and erratic. I wasn't sure what she was doing or planned on doing next. She then put both hands on my forehead, and at this point was screaming while shaking me, but not long before a nurse came in and took her off me. The nurse seemed more irritated that she had to get up and do her job, rather than concerned for how I was doing or feeling. She escorted the woman out and said not to worry and just go back to sleep. I don't know how, but I managed to fall back to sleep. I assume she got transferred to a more severe ward because I didn't see her again the next day, and luckily, I was able to leave later that day. This incident has since been a reminder for me to never go back and to manage my mental well-being, because while I have issues, I could be in a far worse state of mind. I still wake up some nights with lingering anxiety and having to calm myself down to go back to sleep. I never want to go back to a ward in my life to experience this again, or something far worse. Number 2. A little over a year and a half ago, I had a neighbor with a disturbing past. We were the same age, and he came to me one day asking for advice. I didn't turn him away, and I like to try and help people. I don't want to specify too much of what those problems are, but fast forward a week and I get a loud knock on my door. I open, and he pushes me aside and staggers into my house with a bottle of liquor. I told him he should have asked before if he could come over. I'm very busy, and I don't get home till 5 p.m. from work. He starts crying about how he wants to try to kill himself again. Ambulance showed up at 3 a.m. the month prior because he OD'd. I let him vent. I felt bad. Didn't know if he had any friends, and I know he's always cooped up in his house. He started ranting on about all the problems he has, and how he sees things and hears things in his mind. After a while, I started to feel like he was putting this responsibility on me. Apparently, he tried to kill himself because his boyfriend from Canada he met online broke up with him. He showed me messages, and I could see how manipulative he was. He said some disturbing things. "When I kill myself, I'll haunt you and make you suffer." The boyfriend seemed genuinely concerned and overwhelmed. Pretty much, I tried to be as careful as I could so I didn't say anything to trigger him. He asks to go to the bathroom, and after 10 minutes, I start to wonder what was taking so long. I check on him. He was passed out on the floor. I got kind of upset at that point. This person I barely know barges into my house, throws all their problems and fucked up shit on me, then passes out in my bathroom. I tried waking him up, but he wouldn't budge. This guy is average height, skinny, so I was able to wrap his arm around my neck and drag him to his house. I left him there. He started to come knocking on my door every day after this. I wouldn't answer because it was a bit too much for me at this point. A couple of months go by, and one day, I noticed one of my potted plants in my backyard was broken. I kept this plant on a grassy part of my backyard. I have a small portion that is concrete. The pot was on the concrete in front of my sliding glass door. Now, I have had severe anxiety for a couple of years now, and take meds to help, but this was triggering some uneasy feelings. In the morning, leaving for work, he would run out of his house in his pajamas trying to start a conversation with me. At first, I assumed it was probably a coincidence, but after a couple of times, I began to feel like he was sitting in his living room, staring through his window and waiting for me. I started running to my car every morning. I woke up an hour earlier because I was scared to run into him again. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, in my own neighborhood, where I should feel safe. The day where things became very bad, I got home from work an hour earlier than usual. As I'm pulling up, I see him sitting on my porch. I got angry. I was fuming. He knew I was avoiding him. He knew there was no way I could avoid him if he was sitting there in front of my door, waiting for me to get home. I clutched the pepper spray I have hanging on my keychain and called my mom. She was on the phone with me while I was walking to my house, and I felt my heart jump out of my chest. A smile just forms across his face. He says, "You're home early?" I held the pepper spray in front of me and told him to fucking move. I said he had no right to intrude, and the last thing I want is to deal with his fucking problems. He got up and slowly walked away. I didn't say a word. I locked my door and my mom told me that she was coming over. We decided to go to the cops, and I tried to file a restraining order against him. Despite all the events, I explained to the cops I did not have any physical evidence that he was stalking me or intends to harm me. They said as long as he doesn't physically assault me, there isn't much they can do. I felt trapped. I felt so scared, angry. How could this person make me feel so trapped in my own house? I spent the next 2 weeks at my mom and stepfather's house. I was too scared to sleep at home by myself. I got a text message from an unknown number. It was him. It was one of the longest messages that I've ever received. It described how he thought we had a connection, how I deceived him and I'm vain. It was intense. He threatened to kill himself and said it would be my fault, and I could be happy. The world doesn't deserve him. I'm too smart for this world. It doesn't deserve me. You don't deserve me. I woke up my mom, and she was so mad. We drove to the station that same night and showed the cops the messages he had sent, hoping that it would be enough proof to at least give me a temporary restraining order. They started to take my statement more seriously now, and were able to obtain his records. He has minor offenses, most related to endangering himself, and one for exposure. I was granted a temporary restraining order while they continued to investigate. My stepdad stayed at my mom's house, and she came to live with me temporarily. My job is too far away from her house, so it was just easier to be home. One night, I was trying to fall asleep when I felt a glare in my eyes coming from the cracks in the window blinds. I squinted to try and see what it was. It went away. I felt myself getting an anxiety attack. The light turned on again. I heard banging on my window. It went on for a good 5 minutes. I was too scared to look through the blinds, but I knew it was him. It had to be. I ran to the guest room where my mom was sleeping and cried like a baby. Next morning, I went yet again to the police station to tell them what had happened. I had a police officer escort my mom and I home, and they went to speak to my neighbor face to face while we waited in my house. Apparently, he started yelling at the cop and punched him in the nose. The cop called for backup and he was arrested for assaulting an officer. I was encouraged to press charges against him so he could do more prison time. I had to testify in court. I ignored looking in his direction the entire time. He got 4 years for criminal stalking and 8 for assault and battery for punching an officer. He's eligible for parole in 6 years. I hope to this day that he won't be released early. Knowing he's incarcerated is the only thing that's ever made me feel safe again. Number 3. This story is about an event that happened to my mother around 1972 when she was 8 years old. She's told me about it since I was young, and she truly thinks about it and is affected to this day. To set the scene, both of my grandparents ran a restaurant/gas station in our hometown. They have always ran a business of some type since the 50s. This means that a lot of days my mom would have to take the bus home and stay by herself if my grandma had to stay and help run things. Usually no more than an hour or two. My uncle, her older brother, would usually come home on the bus with her, but he was a little older and sometimes had football practice. So was the case on the day of the event I'm getting into. So my mother arrived home on this day, let herself into the house and put away her things. She had just recently received a new puppy and knew the first thing she needed to do was take the pup out to the yard to use the restroom. She wrapped the dog in a white towel, this is important, and walked him outside. As she put down the dog, she shook its hair out of the blanket, flailing it about the wind. It's then that she noticed the neighbor's son was staring at her from across the street. This guy's in his late 20s and was known to be very strange and mentally ill, though in the country, mental illness seems to not always be recognized. He would do psycho shit like killing the neighbor's pigs or skinning stray cats and hanging them from their clotheslines in their yard. Real sick shit. My mom said that he always creeped her and everyone else out. She said he would stare at her when she would play outside and made her feel generally uncomfortable. She said that he appeared out of nowhere in his yard that day, and as she took out the blanket, he began grinning and waving. Feeling more than a little shook, she picked up her pup, went inside and locked the door. She began to do some homework, and after about 5 minutes of work, she heard a loud knock at the door. She slowly walked to the window to see who it was. She knew it wasn't my grandparents because, of course, they had keys. As she opened the blinds, her eyes locked with those of the creep from across the street, like he was already looking in the window. She jumped and said that she screamed a little as she shut the blinds. She walked to the door and made sure it was locked. She said he continued with a slow, continuous thud on the door, almost rhythmic. Then she really got terrified as he began speaking through the door. "Hi, sweetie. I saw you with your doggy. Let me in to see him." She was in shock. "Come on, let me in, sweetie, please. I want to see your puppy." In full freak-out mode, my mom screamed, "You need to leave now. You need to go back to your house. I don't know you." He kept on knocking. I could see the fear in my mom's eyes when she described that part, and it gives my whole body chills. He said, "Damn it, let me in. I saw you waving your flag of surrender." I shit you not, the guy thought my mom shaking hair from the towel was a flag of surrender and a sign for him to come over. My mom screamed, "I'm calling my daddy and the police if you don't leave now." With this, the knocking stopped. She tried to catch her breath and shake off her fear. She then got up from the door and ran to the basement level of the house. It was an old house, so the kitchen and rec room was down there along with the only phone in the house. She made it to the phone and began to dial 911. All of a sudden, she heard a shatter from the next room. She looked over to see the crazed neighbor attempting to crawl through the kitchen window. He was ripping down the curtains as his upper body got through, and my mother screamed what was happening to the police on the phone. All of a sudden, he was bleeding from the abdomen where the window glass had cut him as his lower half couldn't squeeze through. Then my mom began hearing my grandmother's screams. "What the hell are you doing?" Then the guy yelling in pain and squirming out of the window as she hit him hard from behind with some tool that was laying in her garden on the side of the house where the entrance to the window was. He managed to get out of the window and bolted to his house. Grandma called my grandfather, and he arrived as well after shutting down the business as soon as she had told him. They arrested him for breaking and entering, something else I believe that was unrelated. Probation violation, I assume. On the day of his court date, he told them the white flag of surrender story, but this was the final nut on his crazy cake as they put him in a mental institution that day. He may have gotten out and went back because my mother said he later died in an institution outside the courthouse. The crazy Appalachian redneck family of creeps tried to blame my 8-year-old mother, and the man's father called my mother a harlot. Needless to say, my army-trained grandpa beat the guy's ass on the courthouse steps as the local cops turned a blind eye. That story has always stuck with me. My mom's had to receive therapy for it. It haunts her a lot to this day. We always can't help but wonder, though, what would he have done to her if my grandma didn't come home at that moment? So to you, creepy cat killer who traumatized my mom, let's not meet.